Hi everybody, welcome to section 2, Learning MongoDB, Programming for MongoDB. This is the section where we get down to the nuts and bolts and we start writing code. We're going to connect to the MongoDB. We're going to write CRUD operations in both PHP and Python for the MongoDB. We're going to set everything up for you to show you how to access Mongo either through PHP or through Python. However, this particular video and this first half of this section is going to be dedicated to PHP. If you're only interested in the Python section, that's not happening here. You're going to have to look at the course class listing or the course syllabus to figure out what section you want to start with. We're starting with PHP. So Mongo Connections in PHP 7.2 is where we're going to use the PHP Mongo Manager driver. And I explicitly say the manager driver because prior to about a year or so ago, you were using, when PHP 7 came out, PHP 7 deprecated the Mongo client PHP API in favor of the PHP manager driver API. So if you're making your connections to Mongo, or you're used to making your connections to Mongo using the client driver, again, that's been deprecated. We're in PHP 7.x now, and we're going to use the manager driver. And specifically, we're going to use the manager driver to connect to our Mongo instances. And those instances are going to be a standalone instance using RBase, role-based access control, or RBAC. In other words, username and password. We're going to connect to a replication set, and I'm going to show you how to connect to a sharded cluster. And you're saying, but Mike, I've already done all this. I did it the command line. We connected to stuff. We showed that it was working. And I say, yes, absolutely. And now that we have our replication set, now that we have our sharded cluster, now that we have our standalone instance working, yes, we're going to connect to that. But now we're going to do it using PHP. And in part 2 of the section, we're going to do it using Python. So from this point forward, and for the rest of this section, we're only talking about connecting to Mongo using the respective API driver for the respective programming language that we're in, specific or relative to the section that you're watching. At the bottom of the screen is a URL I provided. It should also be in your class notes. This is the PHP website page for the driver manager section of the Mongo API for PHP, and it specifically covers the constructor class. In other words, instantiating an instance of the PHP manager driver in PHP. You may want to familiarize yourself with this web page, with this content at this on the PHP site. Because again, if you're used to using the Mongo client, we're gonna walk away from the Mongo client API driver now, and we're gonna fully embrace the manager driver moving forward. So there's your first look at the URL and access to the resource documentation if you've never seen it before. Now let's talk a little bit about how we're going to set up the class structure of the driver itself that we're going to be writing for our application. Now, whenever we write an application in the real world using PHP, and we're going to connect to Mongo, we're going to do this in a class structure. And obviously, the business class logic is the instantiation class. It's the actual section of code where all the business logic lives. So in other words, if you are going to handle user authentication or session management for your web-based users, all of that code to manage that is going to happen at this layer. And the business logic class is actually the instantiation class. In other words, it exists as a real class, but it also extends the second layer of our code, of our class object, and that's the Mongo abstraction class. And what the Mongo abstraction class has is all the CRUD code for the requests that come from the business logic class. So in other words, if I'm doing a user authentication, the website, the login screen on the website is going to pull the user's username and password down. It's going to pass it to the back end, and the business logic class is going to take the username and password, and it's going to do some validation on it. Is there enough characters in the password? Does the username match the required format? and so on and so on. And it's going to create a query, and it's going to pass that query down to the abstraction class, or it's going to create a payload, a parameter list, a set of arguments for the function, however you want to phrase it. It's going to create a payload, pass that data, that information back down to the Mongo abstraction class, probably in a read command. And it's going to say, hey, can you find this user with this username? And if so, pull the record. And then you're going to return that data back up to the logic class, and the logic class may compare the password, or you may even do it down in the abstraction class for the CRUD operations. I would do it in the business logic class because you want to handle the error generation and everything up in there. But the point is anything that touches the database proper, and that we're talking about create operations, read operations, update operations, and delete operations, is going to be contained within the abstraction class at the second level. So all the CRUD work goes into the abstraction class. Now, the third layer down here showed at the last level is going to contain the connectivity code. And the reason why I'm splitting it out into 3 other additional abstraction classes, which compose its own layer programmatically, is because we want to show you how to connect to either a standalone instance of Mongo, to a replication set, or to a sharded cluster. And these involve a little bit of difference in the actual code. So I'm going to break these out into different classes. When you run your business logic class, you'll have some parameter that says, I'm going to connect to a replication set, or I'm going to connect to an instance, or I'm going to connect to an instance with RBAC, or I'm going to connect to a sharded cluster. And based on that information that's passed to the business logic class, that in turn passes that information down to the first layer abstraction class, which has all the CRUD operations, which in turn invokes the class, the next abstraction class we need, for whatever way we're trying to connect to the database. So if in my business logic, I say, this connection is going to be to a sharded cluster, I pass that information to the abstraction class. The abstraction class evaluates which library I'm going to need, or which type of Mongo instance I'm going to connect to. And then as a result, it makes an invocation to the correct class. So the instantiation class instantiates the abstraction class, and subsequently, the second layer of abstraction, which contains the code that says, I want to connect to this type of Mongo deployment versus this type of Mongo deployment. So this is how we're going to lay out our program object for connecting to Mongo in PHP 7. Okay, that being said, give me a sec. I'm going to pop up a window. This window here, I'm logged into my current Mongo instance. Let me start over from the top. So this is running in a virtual machine. You can see up here on the top where I'm running the Oracle Virtual Machine VirtualBox. You can download this software if you want, and you could run a standalone instance of Ubuntu. In my particular case, I'm running, I believe 1804. Yeah, I'm running 1804. And this is running on the same machine that I'm running my IDE on, where this screen capture software is running, where the presentation is running. It's all running on the same machine. But because I've got this VM running, I have a completely different and encapsulated standalone machine running. And on that machine, I have Mongo running. And the reason why I'm doing that is because this is my work machine, and we're getting to the point where we're writing a lot of code for Mongo. We're creating a lot of records for Mongo. And I want to keep the standalone instance of Mongo that we're going to be using for the rest of this class separate from my work. So I created a VM, and it'll also show you how to make a remote connection programmatically using PHP and Python, because this VirtualBox, even though it lives on the same machine, it's a different machine than what I'm connecting to. So in other words, one of the pieces of information I'm going to need to connect to Mongo on this virtual machine is the IP address of this machine. And when I run the ifconfig command, you can see that my inet line right here at this line level, I can't put my cursor inside the window, is 192.168.1.57. So that is the IP address of the Mongo node I'm going to connect to for the class. I also want to show you that we're running Mongo on this machine. We're running version 3.6.7. And it's a new version of Mongo. It has only the plain vanilla databases installed. The default databases are installed, and there's no data in them. So this is a brand new Mongo installation that we're going to use just for the rest of this video course. Okay, so that's our Mongo environment. Let me show you real quick about my machine. This is the machine that's hosting the virtual machine. And of course, my IP address is 192.168.1.94, and I'll be connecting to the virtual machine at .57. So here you can see I can ping it, my virtual machine. I can ping it just like any other machine on my network, even though it's running virtually in memory on my desktop machine. As far as the program is concerned, if I'm going to see it as a machine somewhere out there on the internet, or at least on my local LAN. Okay, so that being said, let's run over to PHP Storm real quick. And the last thing I want to do is, this is our working directory that we talked about in the last video when we were testing the debugger in the IDE. The next thing I want to do is I want to set up our directory structure to support the level 3 class abstractions that we're going to write. So I'm going to create a couple of directories in here. I'm going to call one REPL set, and I'm going to call the other one, let's see, what should we call it? Let's just call it shard. So most of my code for this section of this class is going to come under this directory here. When I write the abstraction classes for the replication set, I'll put the code in the replication set directory. And when I write the code for connecting to a shard, I'll put that abstraction class in the shard directory. Everything else will be under this root directory for the purposes of this class. So